Good afternoon and welcome to the Bristol Business Connection. The Bristol Business Connection is a co-production of the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce, Fall River Community Media, and Bristol Community College. Every month the Chamber of Commerce will interview guests about the issues impacting businesses in the Bristol County region. My name is Mike O'Sullivan. I'm the President and CEO of the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce. We have a lot to discuss, but first I would like to welcome my guest. Many of you in Fall River know Ed Lambert as the former mayor. He's actually now, is it the executive director?
It is. Yeah.
The executive director of MBAE, which stands for Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education. Ed, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here with you today. And it's always great to be here at Bristol Community College.
It's such a crown jewel of our community. We really, we love the folks here, and we love the resources. In fact, on our driving over today, we were talking about, Nick and I were talking about just what a great resource Bristol Community College is.
Absolutely.
It's really, it's a great place. So Ed, tell us a little bit about MBAE and what it is and what you guys are working on.
So the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education is about 30 years old. It was founded in the late 80s by an educator and a business leader. The educator was Paul Revel, who later became Secretary of Education in Massachusetts. And the business leader was a gentleman named Jack Rennie. And Jack is no longer with us, but he was a leading business leader at the time. And he and Paul Revel got together. They were both on the Board of Education and said, you know, we have to do more in Massachusetts to improve the quality of our schools. This was the late 80s, early 90s. Massachusetts today is first in the nation, but that wasn't always the case. And back then, it was maybe about the middle of the pack. There was a lot of concern nationally. A Nation at Risk was a report that had been just completed. And in Massachusetts, there was a lot of inequity. Places like Fall River and New Bedford, trying to fund public education on the backs of property taxpayers without a lot of state help, found that the schools in urban areas were really lacking, whereas the schools in much wealthier communities were offering their students much more. And so there was a lawsuit that was filed as well. And that lawsuit, as well as the political will in Massachusetts, came together and said, we've got to change how we do public education in Massachusetts. We're going to put significantly new money into schools. But the Mass Business Alliance, in the form of Jack Rennie and Paul Revel, said, we support that. The business community supports that. They travel the state and got support for billions of dollars in new money for schools, with the caveat that it came with some accountability, that there would be a return on investment, that we would put this money in, but we would find ways to make sure that students' scores were actually improving. And so that bill produced for Massachusetts the MCAS exams, which sometimes is controversial, but by and large, because of the achievement exams that we have in our schools, there's been this great effort to improve the quality of education, and now Massachusetts does rank first in the nation. It brought other things as well. It changed leadership, it removed principals from unions, it created a standard curriculum framework across the state, it created charter schools, and it did a lot of things that brought some additional reform and accountability. And a lot of that has long-lasting positive impact today. Unfortunately, what we see is it was underestimated back then what it would cost to fund programs to serve low-income students, English language learners, and employee health insurance in schools. And so that piece in particular started to suck a lot of the money up and away from the classroom. So today we find ourselves in a situation where our organization, MBAE, is back at the table in the legislature on behalf of businesses across the Commonwealth. And I want to say that we're very, very proud that Fall River's local chamber, Bristol County Chamber, is a leading member of our organization and a very active affiliate, you and your board and your education committee. And we are at the same tables saying the same things, that there needs to be more money for education, but there ought to be additional reform. Some might ask, why have additional reform if we're first in the nation? It's great that we're first in the nation, but we also have the largest achievement gaps in the country. And so it's not even, and it's not always fair. And so places like Fall River and New Bedford are getting left behind financially. And the scores for a lot of students, particularly low-income students, English language learners, are not anywhere near where it is for the upper tier of students. And so we've got to close those achievement gaps if businesses are going to have a good talent pipeline and communities are going to be healthy. So thanks for the opportunity to give a long introduction about MBAE, but we think it's a very vital and important organization.
Well, we do as well. And last week at the statewide chamber execs meeting, you were able to speak to the group, and I'm happy to say that shortly after I got here last year, we jumped right in, there's a lot of really good, strong connection. You mentioned our education committee, which is very strong and is, was out in the forefront of saying we need to build new schools in Westport. We need to build a new BMC Durfee High School, and really got out and helped support that. But what's also interesting to me, I serve on the attendance task force for the Fall River schools, and when you talk about the inequality and the disparity in the schools, it's amazing when you look at the different demographics. It's amazing how the demographics can affect that, and it needs a lot of work. But I will tell you that we went 2 weeks ago. We had College Day on a Friday, and I went to BMC Durfee with President Laura Douglas of Bristol Community College, and we were in 3 different classes that had all ESL students, and it was very exciting because a large part of the conversation that we were able to generate with those folks was how it actually could be a good thing for them to be bilingual, and the importance of the need for bilingual people as they grow, especially in markets like Fall River and New Bedford. So those things are very, very exciting. But tell us, as you travel the state and you talk to the different affiliates, the different chambers and some of the other associations, tell us what you're hearing from the different regions.
You'd be amazed at how similar the conversations are that take place. I was in Springfield this morning talking with their chamber. And what we hear from a lot of the business leaders is that while we do have this first in the nation status, students are often graduating from high schools across the state, not just in gateway cities, unprepared for college or a career. And that's not surprising to us. We have this great focus on academic achievement. We support the MCAS. MBAE was there at the initiation of it. And it has moved the needle very significantly on academic achievement. But that doesn't always tell the whole story of the skills that students need to be successful past their graduation. So right now, the state of Massachusetts measures schools based on their ability to get kids to pass the MCAS and to graduate. But it doesn't necessarily assess the rigor of the coursework that they're given, the number of AP courses that might be available, the number of computer science courses. We know, for instance, that computer science is growing in its importance, not just for students who are going to go into IT, but students in almost any endeavor. Computer science is almost becoming as important as English literacy, and 25% of all jobs currently require some level of computer science, and yet 30% of the state's high schools don't have a single computer science course. So we know that while the state has had this great academic success, we have not been focused enough on preparing kids for college. Too many of our kids go to college and either don't persist because they can't, they're completely unprepared for the rigor of that coursework, or they're in remediation. Somewhere around 35 to 40% of students from public schools that go into colleges in Massachusetts have to have some form of remediation. Many students who graduate are also not career ready. That's one of the reasons why we've endorsed new legislation, which your chamber has supported, to have all of our high schools, not just our Voc schools, award students industry recognized credentials so that they can be more prepared for work. So those are the kinds of things we think in this year when we're talking about sending another new $1 billion or $2 billion to schools, we again support that, but want to make sure that there are some of these changes that go along with it. We always need to improve. You can't just do reform once every 50 years and expect that you're going to get it completely right. And there are new things that we need to think about now.
Are you hearing pushback on additional accountabilities?
That's a setup question, right? And it's a very good one.
I've heard the answer before, yes.
So look, there are some voices in our communities, in particular the leadership of the Mass Teachers Association, who are making the point, and it's understandable to some extent, that communities, urban areas have been shortchanged. They ought to have this money, and that this is owed money. And this is not my language. This is the language of some folks taking a different position than we're taking. And they say this is owed money and should come without any strings at all, and that we should just let the money go out, and folks at the local level will know exactly how to use it. That may be true in some cases, but it's certainly not true in all. Our organization has done some research, and we have a scatter graph where we put all 351 cities and towns school districts on a map, and we show the per student spending. There are some school systems spending in excess of $22,000 per student. The statewide average is only about $13,000, and getting very poor results. There are some others who are spending less than the average and who are getting terrific results.
It's an eye-opener.
So it is, and so money certainly is important, but just as important, if not more so, is how you spend the money and where you spend the money. And so if you send a lot of new money to Fall River or New Bedford or somewhere else, and the political will in the community doesn't necessarily send the bulk of that money to the students in schools that most need it, and you just kind of divide it all up equally, you're not going to close achievement gaps the way you need to, because there's a lot of inequity in schools. We have some semblance of a neighborhood assignment policy, and there are some schools that are much more challenged than others. There are some schools in Fall River, and we need to give Fall River and its teachers and its leadership a great deal of credit. There are some schools in Fall River who have a majority of students who are low income, and they're outperforming the state average. So that goes to show you that what can happen inside a school is different. But even in Fall River, from school to school, the results can be very different.
Right.
And that's why there needs to be not just money, but reform as well.
It sounds like it makes sense.
Well, it does, but in the world of policy making, and I served in the legislature for 7 years back in the early 90s, and it is very much like making sausage, and it is a very difficult and challenging process. That's why the business community, through MBAE and its affiliates and our members, has been very active on the other side of this debate. We understand that some people feel like it's owed money. We're not opposed to that money going out, but we think that there should be additional improvement and reform. Everybody in their own business, in their own lives, in their homes, in their workplaces can always find ways to improve and do things better, and we think there has to be that emphasis on this legislation as well.
One of the what's rising to the top amongst our education committee is the need for the state to invest in the pre-K. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, your committee is right, and it's always refreshing to have business voices advocating for evidence-based practices, and that's truly important. There are a lot of different ideas out there about ways to close achievement gaps, but in urban areas or in gateway cities like places like Fall River and New Bedford, significantly proven evidence-based practice is access to high quality, not just any kind of early childhood program, but a high quality early childhood program. That has significant effect in terms of giving students a head start on success. Now, the evidence and the research, though, also shows that if a 3 or 4-year-old goes from a high quality pre-K program into a low quality school, they lose all the benefit. So it's incredibly important. It's like a rocket booster in that sense, giving students a significant head start, but there also has to be real high quality from K through 3 in particular as well. The research also shows that for those students who are not on track or on grade level through grade 3, particularly in reading, are probably going to suffer some very significant academic challenges down the road. So those first few years are vitally important.
Yeah, they talk about reading to kids right from, as soon as they're born, the importance of that. So you've been up in Boston, you've been on Beacon Hill. What are the challenges you're seeing from Beacon Hill?
Well, as much as we think everything in Massachusetts is exactly correct, there are a lot of other challenges. And so this issue of education, which our organization thinks is paramount, competes with a number of other legitimate challenges. Transportation is one. I'm sure that's one that your chamber has been very
much
involved
so.
in, and all you have to do is particularly if you do commute into Boston as I do, and the red line gets derailed, as it did a few days ago, everything gets thrown up in the air, including the traffic on the expressway. So there are competing interests and challenges all the time for attention. But if you look at the graph of how we spend our state money, we put most of our money, $17 billion, now that's a combination of state funds and local funds, $17 billion, far and away the biggest public policy investment we make is in public schools. All the more reason to say there should be some accountability for that. You wouldn't put $17 billion in the transportation system without ways of ensuring that you were going to get some better results. And so
Very true.
In our school system, we think very much the same way. It is a significant investment for us. Of course, there are differences of opinion, but particularly in this climate, the governor, the House Speaker, and the Senate President, and all of the legislative leaders, and of course, we're very blessed to have from our delegation down here, Senator Mike Rodrigues, who now chairs the Senate Committee on Ways and Means, Representative Pat Haddad, who has a significant leadership position in the House.
Right.
These folks have been around for a while. They get it. They understand these issues. And that's a tremendous advantage that we have down here, along with the rest of the local delegation, Reps Fiola, Silva, and Schmidt. They all work very, very hard on these issues as well. And my organization hears from them frequently about what they can do to be supportive.
Well, that's good to hear. It's good to hear. We're going to take a break. So thanks, Ed, and we'll return shortly.
Okay, great. Look forward to it.
The emphasis is on the word community.
That prides itself on making things.
It's the culture of Portugal and the culture of Fall River.
History, hard work, manufacturing.
We're making it, and we're moving it forward.
It's a great place to live, work, and create.
If you think you know Fall River, think again. Fall River isn't a place you pass through, it's a destination. Fall River isn't on the mend, it's on the rise. Fall River isn't about accepting your fate, it's about creating your destiny. We can revive pride and instill positivity. We can make room for this rise. We can make it here.
Well, welcome back. I'm Mike O'Sullivan. I'm the president and CEO of the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce, and this is the Bristol Business Connection. And we're talking with Ed Lambert, the executive director of MBAE, otherwise known as the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education.
Great.
It's a tongue twister
It
some
is.
days. So Ed, as you had just mentioned, you were talking about the budget, and you were talking about how you hear quite frequently from our local delegation, who I would agree with you does a great job representing us, and they're always looking for feedback. So tell me about some of your discussions with the senator and with Rep Fiola and Rep Schmidt and Sylvia.
Well, they understand in particular that we're in a moment right now where there's been this recognition that the gateway cities of Fall River, New Bedford, Springfield, Worcester, Brockton have been significantly challenged because of student population that has high concentrations of high-need students, low-income students, ELL students, and they're all very united in terms of making the case for getting the money that is necessary to close these achievement gaps in places like Fall River and New Bedford. And that's really important. And I don't want to speak for them on the particulars of some of the reform pieces. Everybody's entitled to support one piece or maybe not support another. But they certainly have been very responsive and receptive to the idea that it's not about money alone. And that's something that we think is vitally important. Each of them has a really good handle on what's happening in the schools. They want to see improvements. None of this is to cast stones at anybody who's in the field of education. In fact, MBAE has, as one of its central tenets, the idea that while we should foster accountability and measure outcomes, we also believe that you've got to give good school leaders, principals, and teachers who are leaders in their own right within schools and within their classrooms, you've got to give them the autonomy to make decisions. They shouldn't be told by the state or even downtown in a particular community or at the central administrative office how to do their jobs. They're there, they're trained. We know from a business perspective that the best managers are ones who you give the resources to, you set the goals, you tell them what you expect, and then they either do it or they don't. And if they don't do it, then maybe it's not the right profession for them. But the fact is, trying to micromanage every system, we do have in Massachusetts, unfortunately, a state that is very heavy on compliance. The last time we checked, the state requires of school districts 101 annual plans and 97 reports.
Wow.
And so to the extent that you have a lot of administrators who are not focused on kids, but they're focused on paper, that's unfortunate. And so we'd much prefer to see that change. Just let people do what they do best, measure the results, hold them accountable to what's happening in other schools. Don't ask more for them than should be expected, but by the same token, once you've given them the resources, we all have a responsibility, don't we?
Yes.
To try to figure out how we make kids succeed. And again, not to put this solely on principals and teachers, but there are a lot of reasons why kids are at the bottom end of achievement gaps. Attendance, for instance, is one of them. There are many things that non-school personnel and communities can do to help foster greater attendance at school. So it's a responsibility that we all have. If a community schools are failing, then everyone in that community owns that responsibility.
I agree. I've sitting on the attendance task force. I've learned a lot about attendance and things that I didn't know growing up or with my own children. I didn't know. But there's a lot of really good collaboration. We'd met just this week, but of course the last week is school, so there wasn't a lot of participation this week. But come August and September, you'll have a good 40, 50 people at the meetings, and it's very, very interesting because you have not just teachers or administrators, but you've got the attendance folks, but you also have nurses from the pediatric facilities in town. They provide some of the best feedback and knowledge that I've ever heard. And they've actually created some programs or provided the impetus for Matt Malone, the superintendent, to create a program where kids would have to go to the doctor, but they wouldn't have a way to get back to school. Well, there was a small window where a school van with a school driver was available every day. So there's a certain period of time during the day now that if the pediatrician's office says we've got such and such a student needs a ride back to Henry Lord, they can provide it. So now that the pediatrician's office won't say, okay, well, you're out for the day. They won't write them out for the day. They'll write, they'll stamp it at 10:10, and you need to be back in school.
That's a great solution.
It was I was excited when I heard that.
Yeah.
I was really excited, and what was really nice was Matt Malone was just listening. He was in the room, and he comes to as many of the meetings as he can, and if he can't get to it, there's always a representative of his office there. But he happened to be there that day, and he just said, he put his notes down, and he said, we can solve that problem right now. And he solved it right then.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know that you have a leader that is willing to listen and is willing to collaborate and hears what the people are saying.
Right.
And it's very interesting because in some of those conversations, what I learned a lot about is exactly what the attendance folks are saying is the same exact thing that the people out in the business community are telling us. And they really try to work together to solve these things.
Yeah.
And I, the meeting I was at yesterday, there was a lot of good information. There was fewer people in the room, so but it was a different type of conversation because there was fewer people in the room. But the things that we were hearing, I said, wow. But we can fix some of those things.
Sure.
It seems like we can get them fixed.
Listen, there are incredible challenges in the lives of so many kids. family issues, socioeconomic issues, oftentimes single parents who can't find someone to get the youngster to school or not, or they
Right.
can't afford to take a day out of school,
Right.
day out of work to do certain things. One of the evidence-based practices, I know we talked about early childhood education, but one of the others is what's called wraparound services and bringing some of these social health issues into the schools to try to find ways to make sure that kids get what they need
Right.
at school. I also saw this week that very appropriately the school system here has announced that they're joining a new federal program that will allow for a free breakfast and lunch for every student
Yeah, that's
in the
exciting.
school system.
Yep.
And that's really important. And you know, look, I understand sometimes the old school philosophy is, well, these are schools. You know, why do we need to be providing service X, service B, whatever? The fact of the matter is that if we don't provide these services as a community, as part of school-based programs, then we're consigning a lot of the students to just not being successful in the future. And who pays for that
We do.
down the line? Sure.
We do, and we'd rather have we need, just on the business side of the world, we want kids to come up through a school system that's nurturing and caring, holds them accountable, but so by the time they come out when they're 18 years old, whether they choose to go into the trades or choose to go to college or whatever choices they decide to make, that they've got the skill set to be able to compete as on a human level, to work with people.
Right.
And we're seeing more of that, and you know that federal program is a great example.
Yeah.
And I was very happy to hear that you know Fall River joined that. It's good stuff. It's very good stuff.
You know, the fact is that our schools are populated by some incredible educators, some unbelievable teachers. I've gotten to know many of them in my time here in Fall River. I see them now in schools across the Commonwealth. They care very much about the kids in their care, but oftentimes just don't know how to help. If there's a particular family, or they've got 24 other kids they have to worry about,
Right.
and they can't put the attention into the 2 or 3 kids that most need that help.
Yeah.
And so it's all of our responsibility to try to figure out ways to get services into those schools. That's where a lot of this new money for kids who are from either low-income backgrounds or ELL backgrounds, that's where a lot of that new money can and probably should go
Right.
for those kinds of services.
And that a great example of that is the Social and Emotional Learning Summit that the Bristol County Chamber Foundation put on, sponsored by Bay Coast. The Mass Teachers Union was an incredible part of it. The Fall River Public School Systems, but there was teachers from all over the region, and it was held at Somerset Berkeley Regional High. It had over 300 teachers participate, and it's helping change and improve and address the social and emotional learning issues, which that's what educators are telling us is one of the greatest challenges. And we had great success with that. And then we also had great success in the spring when we did the Early Education Summit.
Right.
You know, Joanne Sprague and the group, they did a great job. And of course, Joanne drives herself very hard, so she felt like there wasn't enough people there. But it was a very successful event, and that's focused on the early childhood education side of it, and which we really do believe is important.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's always a great opportunity to get together and discuss these issues. People can email me directly if they have any other questions about this. My email is elambert@mbae.org, or of course they can catch me on the streets of the city that I truly love. I'm born and raised in Fall River, still have an opportunity to live here. I love this part of the state. I think we're very lucky, and I appreciate the work that the Chamber does to help keep it active and economically healthy.
Well, thank you, Ed, and we appreciate the work that you do. It's great knowing you're here. It's very convenient, so we know we can always depend on you when we need you to talk. And we look forward to continuing the dialogue and trying to solve these challenges.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Michael.
Ed.
Appreciate it. Thank you.